Hey guys, welcome to this evening's special live stream. I'd like to wish each and every one of you a very happy new year. Hopefully you had a great time last night spending some time with your family. I'm also hoping that you've got some fun plans for this evening and this weekend to enjoy yourself and really kick off the new year. I spent pretty much the entire day today trying to figure out a game plan for 2021 for not just the channel, but for me personally, and just trying to figure out which direction I want to go, and trying to figure out if I want to produce more content, or if that's even possible, or if I want to try to just improve the existing content. I know there's a lot of people that I watch on YouTube that aren't really in this space, but guys I have a lot of respect for that just crush it on YouTube. They do so well, but they produce a lot of content, like daily videos, and I'm just trying to figure out how I could do that, but there's just no way I could do it with the whiteboard videos because they take so long to produce and actually do well. So trying to figure out, I don't know, maybe I'll do like a news program. I was thinking about that, maybe like a daily news program about investing in macro. But I don't know. Anyway, that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out today, among other things. Some personal stuff, just trying to kind of jot down where I want to focus and where I want to be at the end of 2021 from a physical standpoint. You know, I need to work on my my core strength more at the gym, you know, and I need to do more swimming. When I was in St. Bart's, I really learned how bad I am at swimming in the ocean. And when I was there, if you guys followed that story, I did a lot to improve, and I did improve dramatically when I was there as far as my ability to swim in the ocean. But it's just a great workout, so I need to do more swimming this year as well. But anyway, let's get to your questions, guys. That's why you're here. I just wanted to wish everyone that happy new year before we get going, and make sure you check out Rebel Capitalist Pro. I always like to remind everyone to do that at the beginning of the live stream. You know, another thing that I'd strongly suggest you guys do, as most of you know, one of my partners in Rebel Capitalist Pro is Lyn Alden, and she is one of the most intelligent people I have ever met in my life, if not maybe the most intelligent. And her research is second to none in this macro space. And I knew back like 8 or 9 months ago when I first interviewed her that she at the time, she only had like 10,000 subscribers on Twitter. And as soon as I got done interviewing her, I knew that she was just going to completely blow up and be I mean, I thought at the time she's a superstar, but now she has over 100,000 Twitter followers, and you just see her absolutely everywhere on Macro Voices, on Real Vision. And she deserves it because she just gives so much incredible value with her content. But I'm going to, later on tonight, if you guys are following me on Twitter, I'm going to retweet a story that, Lyn never really talks about her personal backstory. But I was reading about it in an article that she did back in 2017. I didn't even know this, that when she was a kid, she was homeless for like 5 years with her single mom. I mean, her upbringing was just incredible. To see where she is today and how she, just, you want to talk about bootstraps and grit, and just making it happen regardless of the circumstances. I mean, she's the quintessential American dream. I mean, she sums it up, and she did it through just hard work, determination, and effort. And I mean, I'm sure all of you have a tremendous amount of respect for her, but check out that article. It's a real quick read. And after you read that, trust me, you're going to have 10 times the respect for her that you already do. She's definitely a special person. That is for sure. Okay, let's get into your questions. Go to the top here. Looks like First question, is marriage a viable investment? Well, I mean, it depends how you define investment, Richard. Obviously, from a personal standpoint, of course, it can be. From a financial standpoint, it depends on where you live and what the laws are like, and if you're a guy or a gal, and it's different. and the reason I say, and I don't want to seem like I'm painting each sex with a broad stroke here, and generalizing too much. But the bottom line is, if you look at human psychology, women typically like to date or marry from a socioeconomic standpoint, either sideways or up. And as guys, for the most part, we generally don't care about that stuff too much. So usually, especially the way the laws are designed in the United States, if there is a divorce, and again, I say usually, there's always exceptions, and it doesn't apply to everyone, but let's call it 80-85% of the time, the guy's going to have a tough time with that from a financial standpoint. So I always suggest people just go in understanding human psychology and understanding female psychology and understanding male psychology. So you go into a marriage with the greatest probabilities of it being successful. Because let's be honest, I mean, nowadays, what's the divorce rate, like 50%? And then if you have kids and you're bringing up your kids in a single parent household, and listen, that's no good for the kids. That's especially when you look at what percentage of kids are raised by single parents today, and then you look at that, and then you look at the problems that the kids have today as they go through their teenage years and adults. And I think a lot of that goes back to the fact that they're just not raised in a two-parent family. Usually means they're not raised with a real strong male figure as a part of their lives. Because, and this is no knock against single moms, I'm not here to do that, but bottom line is, especially for young boys, 8, 10, 12 years old, you go home and you're in a female environment because you're the single mom, and you go to school and 95% of your teachers are female. So especially for young boys, that's tough. They get into a lot of trouble. And I know, because I was a young boy and I had a single mom, and I know, I was very fortunate that I played sports, and I was super competitive, hyper competitive. So that really kept me busy with something positive in my life. If it wasn't for that, I mean, I already got in a ton of trouble as a kid. I'm not going to get into it. I think most people would blow their minds how much trouble I got into. I mean, juvenile court all the time, getting suspended from schools, expelled, or on the brink of getting expelled from schools. I was constantly in trouble. And I think it would have been even worse if I didn't have sports as a positive influence in my life. So anyway, let's talk about economics and investing. But just make sure you go into it understanding human psychology, because if you do, you're going to have a much better outcome for not only yourself, but your partner and potentially kids. And by the way, a book I'd read on that, Richard, is a book from a gentleman by the name of Rollo Tomasi, which is, I believe, his pen name. It's called The Rational Male. And it really dives into that. I would suggest it for men and women. Okay, Ed, George, if I wanted to move to another country, how would I get my physical metals there without them confiscating all of it? Well, they're not going to confiscate it if you just ship it there. I can't just put it in a suitcase and carry it. Is this stupid? Well, it depends on how much you have. I mean, you can get a lot of value or purchasing power in your suitcase or your briefcase. That's for sure. But Ed, people ship precious metals all the time. I mean, you just insure it, and I mean, that's how you get precious metals if you're buying it from Lynette Zhang or Peter Schiff or Mike Maloney or the Perth Mint or anything. That they're going to ship it to you. They're not going to you're not going to fly over there and grab it. So there's plenty of options. You're not the first person to want to ship precious metals. So I just go online and check out those options. Okay, best advice for those not able to leave America. When do you think the cutoff point is for being able to leave? And is investing here still a good idea? Well, historically, if you look at that, usually if you don't have a plan B set up, you're not going to have a lot of time. I mean, look at what happened with the East Germans when they built the Berlin Wall. I mean, happened pretty quick. I mean, not overnight. And let's also remember that the Berlin Wall was built, well, not that it was built, but it was sold to the people in East Germany as a way to protect them. It was for their safety. Ring a bell? Or sound familiar? So that's why whenever I see governments doing things in the name of safety, it's like the hair on the back of my neck kind of stands up, and I don't like that. I don't like that at all. My default, right or wrong, is to be skeptical whenever I hear that from governments and assume that there's something going on that's nefarious. At the very least, they're going to usurp power, whether it's intentional or not. They're going to do it, and then they're never going to give it back. That's probably the best case scenario there, even if it isn't intentionally nefarious. So let me go back to your question here. I want to make sure also the best cutoff point. Yeah, so you never really know, and that's why you want to have a plan B, and that's even if you're not able to leave the United States. I would set up residency somewhere. You can set up residency in Panama to where that's an option for you to leave. Very easily, but with a U.S. passport, you can get usually, and I would have said this more confidently prior to the cerveza sickness. But what we saw back in March, and I was traveling. I mean, you guys know I was trying to get from Medellin to St. Bart's to hang out with Hugh and a place Hugh Hendry, to hang out in a place that had some more freedom. And it was getting really hard to travel with a U.S. passport. And if you would have asked me that in 2019, I would say, no way is it going to be difficult to travel with a U.S. passport in 2020. Even I would have said that. So I was even shocked. So it's always good to have that plan B. And if you, like with Panama, I mean, you could always just, if you had residency set up there, you'd have to have that passport to even drive down there, go through Mexico. But I think the more things you have set up there, and again, you don't have to really leave the United States to do that. You might have to travel for a week or two, but it's not like you have to live in Panama to set that up. Panama is one of the places I know where you can do that just through having X amount of dollars in a bank account. But then you got a bank account, and it's just you're kind of taking these steps. So if it hits the fan, then you're good to go. And then lastly, I think what everyone can do, especially if you kind of live in the suburbs, like most Americans, is just have a darn RV, for heaven's sakes. I know it sounds silly, but I mean, what's your downside? Have an RV, have a good diesel truck in the driveway, have the RV stocked with food. So if we get a lot of social unrest, which I think we're going to get, I am a firm believer in what Chris Cole says, that you cannot destroy volatility. You can only redirect it. So if the Fed and the government is trying to suppress volatility in the stock market or with asset prices, which they obviously are, the more they're able to achieve those objectives, that volatility has to go somewhere. And in my opinion, it's going to be redirected into society. And it makes sense because now you've got an economy that's completely built on asset prices. Our economy is almost as dependent upon asset prices as the Venezuelan economy was dependent upon oil. So if they're propping that up, then the people that benefit from those asset prices are going to be the people that hold benefits. And the people who are really going to struggle are the people that increasingly can't afford to buy assets. So you've got the haves and the have-nots, and you've got the haves getting richer and richer and richer, and fewer of them getting richer because some of them have to cash out because they're baby boomers and they need money for their living expenses. So you have a greater percentage of the have-nots. And if you guys, I've done a couple videos on this, but one of my favorites is a gentleman by the name of Brett Weinstein, and he's not a macro guy. I believe he's a evolutionary biologist by trade. But I've heard him on Rogan a few times and interviewed by Dave Rubin, and his brother's great too, Eric Weinstein. But Brent was pointing out on Rogan's podcast that social unrest usually isn't determined by how well or not well the poor or the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder in the society is doing. It's the delta between the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder and the top. So what he's saying is, if you had a society where the poor are making $10,000 a year, and they're really struggling, but the rich, let's say, quote unquote, or the top 1% is making $100,000 a year, you're going to have less social unrest than a society where the quote unquote poor are making $30,000 a year, but the rich are making $1 million a year. And see what the Fed and the government is doing by trying to suppress the volatility in asset prices, because now they don't have a choice. They do not have a choice. Going back to that Venezuelan example. And I don't think I'm being hyperbolic there. I'm sure some people would accuse me of that. But if you really think it through, I think there's an argument that our economy is just as dependent upon asset prices as the Venezuelan economy was dependent upon oil, especially if you take out the kind of the ace up our sleeve, which is having the reserve currency. If we didn't have the reserve currency, and then I would definitely say it's a pretty equal comparison. But my point is they have to prop up those asset prices. They don't have a choice. So then it gets really bad, super ugly. So that only leaves you with one conclusion, is that the volatility goes into society and we see more and more social unrest. Look, I mean, I'm watching my Twitter feed. Look what happened the other day with, I don't know if you guys saw it, but like that football game, that college football game, where they just, I don't know, it was like everyone on the bench, they just start brawling. And it's like, what is going on here? And then you look at all of the riots and the looting. And obviously, there were a lot of cross currents or a lot of factors that went into that. But I think one of the big factors that goes into everyone freaking out is this movement of volatility, not only from a standpoint of economics and the haves and the have-nots, which is what we were talking about, but also you lock people up in a cage for a year with these lockdowns and whatnot, and you keep people social distancing for a year. That's not how we're set up as human beings. We are social creatures. So I get the benefit, or the perceived benefit, right? That we're trying to save lives. Listen, I get it. But you've got to understand that there's costs involved with that as well. And if you keep people from socially interacting for years or months or years potentially on end, and you lock them in your house, in their homes, and you're going to have problems. You can have big problems with that. So I think that it's just all of these layers and all of these factors just equal a very high probability for social unrest moving forward. And if you guys watch my video that I did, my last whiteboard video, it was on the cerveza sickness, and that I've been thinking that through a lot, and unfortunately, I'm not happy about it, but I think that we're going to have these lockdowns and or mandatory, just more government regulation, um, and not permanently, but on and off for many years to come. And I don't think this is a one-off, because I went back and looked at all of the we'll call them viruses or whatever that we've had since 2003. There's been a lot of them. I mean, I forgot. I had to actually write them down on my legal pad and read them off on my whiteboard video, because there's just way too many to remember. I mean, there's probably like 10 or 12 that we've had since 2003. So you figure we get one of these things once every other year, or once every year and a half or something like that. So now that the government has crossed this line where they're willing to come in and just lock everything down, and that would have been unthinkable in 2019 for even the most far left-leaning person, right? But here we go. We've got it, and once the government crosses the line, it's very hard to get them back, and people now are accustomed to it. You've got people acclimated. Oh my gosh, there's another cerveza sickness. Oh, well, I guess we're just going to have to go into lockdown again. I mean, what are we going to do? I mean, it's like you get people used to it. And then, and I'm not saying that the next one or the one after that, it's going to be as severe, but I am saying that that's kind of going to be their default, to just lock everything down and let's just see what happens. And I don't want to go down a conspiracy road, but we'll just take it at face value that they just lock everything down, see what happens, wait 2 or 3 months. And the conclusion was that of that video, where I kind of posed the question, is this something we're going to have to live with permanently on and off? And the conclusion that I came to, and I still believe this, is it depends on when we get to a point where the pain from the lockdowns is more severe than the perceived loss of safety. So let me give you an example. If so how could that happen, right? I think it's due to inflation, because if we don't get inflation through all these stimulus checks and UBI and everything that's going out, what the next time, let's say this happens again in a year and a half or 2 years, they're just going to lock down again, because people don't think there's a downside economically, and especially in these states like California. So they're just going to say, well, why don't we just lock down for a couple months and give everyone stimulus checks so they don't have to go to work, because there was no downside in it. Last time we didn't see inflation. I think they just keep doing that until we get inflation. And you guys know what, as well as I do, at some point it's time to pay the fiddler. And once that inflation genie gets back in the bottle, very difficult to get that back in. So then I think the pain from inflation gets greater and greater and greater and greater, until it's a point where people realize that if we lock down again, if they do more money printing, then if they do more stimulus, in other words, that it's going to exacerbate inflation. And they're like, no, we're done. No, because we cannot, because now the pain of inflation is worse than the pain of the perceived damage from a health standpoint that an unknown cerveza sickness may or may not have. So instead of the default being lockdown, now the default's going to be nope. We just got to wait and see how this thing plays out, because we cannot afford to go into lockdown again and just print money to try to paper over the problem. That was a huge tangent. Sorry about that, guys. But obviously, when I do these videos, there's a reason I do them. It's because that's what I've been thinking about, and I continue to think about it because I think it's very important. I think that's important. Well, I think a lot of things are important, but that's super important. And then I think the Chinese digital currency is extremely important as well. And I don't think many people are really paying much attention to it. But anyway, let me keep going here. I'm sorry for that tangent. So will we see a stock market correction of 10 to 30% in the first quarter of 2021? Chris, obviously there's no way to know definitively. No certainty, it's just a matter of probabilities. But I think if you want to use a little game theory, what you're going to have to do is try to determine how likely stimulus is from the government, or maybe government gridlock, and then determine, okay, once you determine what probability that we get stimulus, then ask yourself the question, how much? And that will, I think, and then how are they delivering the stimulus? So if they're doing stimulus just by building a new Hoover Dam, then I don't know that that goes into the stock market. If they're doing a stimulus by giving everyone $2,000 a month, then I think that's going into the stock market for a lot of different reasons. You have a huge amount of retail participation right now. And I mean, you've got these, there's no commissions anymore. You have all of these high flying stocks that the retail investor knows. Even the people who don't have a lot of experience investing, such as Tesla, they're just going to the moon. So that makes everyone greedy. Everyone has FOMO. And so if people are getting $2,000 a month, also you have to understand the psychology behind this from the standpoint of our economy, especially with these lockdowns. Now it doesn't have as much opportunity for those people, especially young people, to go out and work hard and get ahead. And I'm hard on millennials often, and I think there's a reason to be, but I also want to acknowledge the fact that when I was their age, the priority, the way you got rich was to go out there and work your ass off. Everyone knew that, and people believed that if you went out there and sacrificed and worked 80 hours a day, sooner it may be a matter of luck from the standpoint of timing, but sooner or later you're going to do well. You're going to do well, and I don't think there's that attitude out there anymore. And I think a lot of it is correct, and that's real. I don't think that's just a figment of their imagination. So if you're in that position, the only way to get ahead is, in their minds, and I think, again, a lot of this is justified, is to get rich by buying assets and seeing the price go up. That's the only way you're going to get rich. And see, this is confirmed by social media. And they get into this echo chamber where they're all the people that they're subscribing to on Instagram or Twitter, they're making millions, or so they say. They're making millions in Bitcoin, or millions in gold, or millions in their Tesla shares, and they're driving around these Ferraris, Lamborghinis. This creates a massive amount of FOMO. Also, you have to take into consideration, we've never been in this mania type of bull market with social media. Think about, everyone compares it to the late 1990s. Okay, maybe, but we didn't have social media. We didn't have these echo chambers at the just you put on your phone and you're just getting notifications just nonstop, and we all know that social media is designed to keep you hooked and grab your take your emotions and get you emotionally invested, and it releases the the endorphins, or the what is that thing that releases, that chemical that releases in your brain? Dopamine. That's what I was thinking of, dopamine. And it's designed to give you those dopamine hits, right? We didn't have that back in 1999 or 1998. So and I don't hear a lot of people talking about that, even in the macro space. That, like, I don't hear anyone really talking about the impact that has on our current market conditions. And I think a lot of people are missing the boat there. So anyway, another tangent here. I guess tonight's the night of tangents. But to answer your question, there's no way of telling, but I think if you want to kind of use a little game theory, Chris, just try to figure out what's happening with stimulus and then kind of reverse engineer it. And that'll tell you what will most likely happen with the market. Again, no certainties, only probabilities. How do you see funds being held by city agents for city workers through 401ks, deferred compensation, deferred retirement? Are these accounts safe? Well, nowadays, John, nothing is 100% safe. And what I would encourage you to think through is even if you're, I'm assuming you have the retirement account, even if your payments are quote unquote safe in nominal terms, are they safe in real terms when you adjust for inflation? So let's say that you're promised $2,000 a month. That's fine. You might get your $2,000 a month, but it might be you might only be able to buy a loaf of bread with the $2,000 a month. And obviously I'm using extreme just to kind of paint the picture. So, I was listening to Schiff's podcast this morning, and he really said something insightful. And he was talking about the Fed coming in and basically bailing out the government by monetizing the debt, the federal government. But he says, why won't they do that with the states? If there's a state that's going into bankruptcy or can't pay its pensions, why wouldn't the Fed just come in and buy the debt that the state of California or Illinois or New Jersey that they issue, and there you go. And then once it happens with one state, then Schiff made the great point that it's most likely going to happen with every state, because once a state sees another one get bailed out by the Fed, then why on earth would they be fiscally prudent? That would be dumb, because they could spend like drunken sailors, and the Fed's just going to bail them out. That creates more M2, and because you're not taking dollars out of the system to buy those bonds like you normally would. See, generally, when even the federal government, when they spend money, they're really kind of just reorganizing existing money, because people that have currency out in the currency units or purchasing power in the real economy, they're buying those bonds. So the government takes that purchasing power from the individuals who are paying the taxes or buying the bonds, and then redistributes it to others, right? When the Fed monetizes the debt, now they're creating new additional bank deposits in the real economy, or however you want to say that, M2, broad money, bank deposits, bank liabilities, whatever, currency units. It's not the same thing. So my point is, if the states start doing this as well, and the Fed is monetizing the debt from the states, whoo, boy. Just look at a chart of what M2 money supply. And I know that that's not an accurate chart. I totally agree with my good buddy, Jeff Snyder. But it is kind of a reflection, at least, to what what's happening with the currency units that are in actual commercial bank deposits in the real economy. So we know that it's just gone parabolic since March, and that's with basically the Fed bailing out the government and monetizing the debt, these $5 trillion deficit. Just think if they're bailing out every single state. Whoo, man. Oh my goodness. We've created, just the way the government or the way the Fed measures it, we've created an additional something like 20 or 25% of our entire M2 or broad money supply just this year. Just this year. Just think of how much we'd create if we were bailing out all the states as well. And then remember, once we bail them out, then they're going to spend even more than they otherwise would have. You're talking about us like doubling the broad money supply like every year. Holy cow. Holy cow. Make sure you own some gold. That's all I got to say. Own some gold or whatever. I like gold because it's an insurance policy. I know everyone says, "Oh, say Bitcoin," but I just see Bitcoin as more of a speculation. So gold for me is that store of value to hedge against all the insanity of the governments. But I see that as something that is potentially going to be a part of our future, especially if they keep doing these lockdowns, because that's just going to reduce the amount of tax receipts. And it's just that's something that nobody ever talks about either. They say, oh, well, GDP only went down by 5% or 6% or 7% or whatever. Yeah. And the government had to spend an extra $5 trillion in order for GDP to only go down by 5%. And even when GDP goes down by 5%, what happens to tax receipts? They absolutely plummet. Look at a chart of tax receipts as a percentage of GDP. It's not the tax rates that have anything to do with it. It's a recession. So if we have a massive contraction of GDP, and most of that GDP is a matter of stimulus checks, where there's not a lot of tax that's being paid on that, because remember, you don't have the payroll taxes on that, right? So you have, as a percentage, the receipts to GDP plummets. It's going to happen at a state level as well. So James, I don't know who that is, my friend. I don't know who James Gammon is. I have no idea. What should I do for your birthday? Have fun. Enjoy yourself. Life is short. So whatever fun is for you, go do that. How much gold would you have as a portfolio? 5, 10, 20? Do you like specific gold stocks? Or, well, I see gold stocks. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, two separate things. So, Adam, for me, gold stocks are a speculation, just like I would consider Bitcoin or uranium, something like that, something that doesn't necessarily pay me to own it. And then gold for me it doesn't serve the same purpose in the portfolio. So it's just apples to oranges. That's why I don't understand the comparison between gold and Bitcoin. I really don't get it. But for me, gold is just an insurance policy. So for that reason, I just like the physical gold. Again, the miners for me would be in a completely separate category. That would be more of a speculation, where you're just kind of betting that there's more upside than downside. Kind of you're just seeing an asymmetry there. So for me, it's just 10%. Okay, what is your opinion on delisting of the Chinese oil companies from the U.S. stock market? I don't know, Robert. I haven't looked into that, so I don't want to really venture a guess. You know who would know is, I'll plug Rebel Capitalist Pro. Shameless plug here. Definitely check out Rebel Capitalist Pro. Robert May, check out the $1 trial offer we have, because who would know that question would be, or who would have a great answer to that question would be Chris McIntosh. And he's my other partner in Rebel Capitalist Pro. It's Lyn Alden and Chris McIntosh. So check that out if you get some time. What is the end game? What is the end game? Is the idea for the West to devalue all hard currency, fiat currencies, I think you're saying, as to hurt the Chinese dollar-denominated assets, bonds? So it's just something much bigger is going on here. Well, I think what you're trying to ask is, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but is what's kind of the end game for money? What's the end game for global money? And obviously China would play into that. I read some projections the other day that their economy will be larger than the United States by 2028. That's by pretty much every measurement. So who knows when it will happen? But obviously, my guess would be at some point in the future, the Chinese economy will, in fact, surpass the United States economy, and they'll be using a lot more commodities. And I just discussed this with Lyn the other day. Just FYI, guys, we've got a video coming out that I'll promote next week, where Lyn and I sit down for like a half hour and discuss investment tips for, again, we're not saying tomorrow or the next year or even the next 5 years, but over the long term, the next 10, 15 years, the dollar gradually losing reserve currency status. So we go take a deep dive into, if you believe that is going to happen, then here's how we would suggest in setting up your portfolio. And here's what we're doing in our own portfolios to take advantage of this outcome, because both of us believe the probability, kind of our base case, is that over the next 10, 15 years, the dollar will gradually lose its hold. And it's not that there'll be something to replace it, but we'll kind of see this more decentralized approach. But that said, an interesting curveball in there would be the Chinese digital currency. So that's what I wanted to have you kind of think through with this question is, I wouldn't really look at money as something like a piece of paper that we use to transact with. I would look at money, like global money, from a standpoint of a network. So in my mind, the digital yuan that the PBOC is setting up is creating a network, and it has it's got a huge head start because of how much investment China has already made into Africa, into South America, into India, the Belt and Road Initiative with Eastern Europe. They've got a presence in all of these places. And for Americans, I don't think we really understand that. Why? Because most Americans never travel outside the US. If you do, like I have, you see that when you go to random countries, such as Ecuador, you go to Quito, the capital city, there's Chinese walking around everywhere. Like, what? I'm in Quito, Ecuador. How are there all these Chinese people? See, it's because they've got a presence. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I'm saying it is. This is a fact. And so if they're in Quito, they're in all these places in Africa, they're setting up infrastructure, they're taking control of resources. And it's not to say, again, this is good or bad. It's just, it is what it is. But so they've got this network, let's say, that's set up that could pretty easily be switched over to using yuan instead of, especially from a digital standpoint, because the ease of transaction would be just like Bitcoin. It would be just like a cryptocurrency. Not that it would be decentralized, but the ease of transaction, the cross-border payments and whatnot, would be just instantaneous. And all of those entities and people, regardless of where they were in the entire world, they would have an account with the Central Bank of China, just like all of us have thought through what would happen if the US had a digital currency, and that we would all have an account with the Fed. But I think that's kind of where most of our thinking has stopped. We haven't thought about, okay, well, if the PBOC has a digital yuan, then okay, the Chinese people are going to have to use that within China. But we haven't taken it a next step and thought about, well, wait a minute, what would prevent a Chinese corporation, or not even an African corporation, setting up an account with the PBOC and getting their next loan denominated in digital yuan, assuming that, let's say, their country now was doing the majority of their business with China, and maybe some of these other oil producing nations would start to denominate or sell their oil in multiple currencies, the yuan being one of them. So you see, my point is, it's this network, right? Then you look at the network the dollar has, which obviously is extremely strong, and you look at the euro dollar system. But all the euro dollar system is commercial banks around the world lending to corporations and other banks in dollars. They're creating dollar-denominated loans. Okay, well, why couldn't a central bank do that? And I'm not saying that the Fed couldn't. They could, but the PBOC in China has a huge head start on us, a huge head start. And I think that they're really seeing kind of the future where our politicians or our, I don't want to call them leaders because I don't think they're anything close to a leader, but our central planners, let's say, are just, running around with their, like chickens with their heads cut off, trying to figure out the next $2,000 stimulus check or trying to figure out what city to shut down next. It's just, I don't think we're on the same mental wavelength, or they're definitely not thinking about the same things. Hopefully I'm wrong. I don't know. But not that I hope that there's any type of digital currency from a central bank. From a personal standpoint, I don't like that. I don't like it at all. But I'm just trying to think it through from a standpoint of macro. So my point is, with this question, is really try to think through not necessarily competing money or competing currencies, but try to think through competing networks. Because I think that's what it's about. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see the Chinese digital yuan, the network, compete with the network of the dollar, competing potentially with the network of Bitcoin. And we'll have to see who wins. I'm not sure, but China's got a big head start. How do I see van life as an economic getter? I don't know. I mean, that's tough to be productive when you're living out of a van. But I mean, Martin, if you're wanting to save money on housing expenses so you can take that money and invest, I suggest house hacking. I think that's maybe a better way to go, where you're just buying a duplex, a triplex, fourplex, and you're just buying it, hopefully with 30-year fixed rate debt. And you're just making sure that at the end of the month, you still have positive cash flow. So your tenants are paying the mortgage. They're paying the property taxes. They're paying the maintenance. They're paying the property, the insurance and whatnot. And then you're just taking your monthly payment, or what would have been your rent payment, what would have been your mortgage payment, and you're investing it. You're building a portfolio. So, I mean, this could be fun. This could be an adventure. It's definitely the type of adventure that I would do, maybe for a week or a month, but I'm not a real van life guy. But I do like adventures like that. But I don't know from an economic standpoint if it would make a lot of sense. I don't. I know you'd be saving a lot of money and seeing the United States, the world, but I just don't know how productive you can be living in a van. I mean, it could. This question is, why wouldn't the dollar go into a more exponential decline once it hits a certain point? I think it could, because you've got so many dollars outside of the United States that would flood back in, and you don't have that issue with other currencies. I was talking to Snyder the other day, and he was saying that there's, who knows, double, triple, maybe even the amount of dollars outside of the United States that we don't even know about, just because of the euro dollar system. Now, Brent Johnson would say, well, yeah, but that's all debt. So those dollars are needed to pay off that debt. So maybe they could come back in. It's all a matter of velocity. And that's where it gets really kind of complicated. But yeah, I mean, to your point, just think about it this way. If you're a foreigner and you're saving, and some of your portfolio is in dollars, because let's say you live in Colombia, you want liquidity, you want cash, but you're really not a big fan of the Colombian peso. And let's say you do business in the United States, so you've got $10 million in reserves, in your bank account, and maybe your multi-currency account or something like that. And let's say you see the dollar go from 70 on the DXY, and it breaks through that bottom line resistance and just crashes in like 2 weeks down to 50. What are you going to do? You going to keep those dollars? Maybe, but maybe not. You might be like, holy cow, I got to sell this sinking ship. So you either sell the dollars to get whatever currency, or you take those dollars, buy something in the US, a US asset, let's say real estate or stocks, but those dollars go back into the system. So there's so many dollars in accounts outside the United States that there's a much bigger risk, to your point, than it would be with the same thing happening with even the yen or the euro, which are still terrible currencies, or maybe the Singapore dollar is a better example. So, but the question really is, at what point does that happen? And is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? I don't know. And then you have to figure out, what's the timing, and see. I think we should all remember that the dollar has been at 70 on the DXY. Keep in mind, it's like 90 and everyone's freaking out because it's so low right now. It's been at 70 there's no talk of it losing its reserve currency status. There was no exponential selling of the dollar. It was kind of a nothing burger. So I don't know. I mean, is that 50? I think a lot of it depends on the pace of the decline. If it just happens gradually over the next 5 years, that the dollar goes from 90 down to 50, I don't know. I mean, there's going to be winners and losers there, but I don't know if everyone just fire sells their dollars. But if it goes from 90 to 50 in a month, then there's going to be some fire sales for sure. So the timing's just impossible. The line in the sand is impossible to know. I think you just got to set up your portfolio. I think what's easier to know or have an opinion on is the probabilities of the dollar going down against hard assets, against consumer goods and services domestically, and potentially against other currencies or money, being gold, over the long term, over the next 5 years, 10 years, and then kind of set up your portfolio accordingly based on what your opinion is. I think to know what the dollar is going to be a year from now, it's very difficult, especially for amateurs to know with any degree of certainty. But to know where it's going to be in 5 years, I think it's a little easier. Okay, so take a few more questions here. I'm not sure. Oh, that question just moved on. What types of treasuries, meaning what maturities, does China hold? Well, they kind of stopped buying as many treasuries as they were about 6 years ago, and they started taking those dollars and using them to invest in these in the Belt and Road Initiative. Lyn did a ton of work on this. So if you guys haven't seen her most recent blog post about the petrodollar or my video, definitely check that out. And my video is based on her blog post, by the way. But as far as the mature, I mean, that's a good question, because if the average maturity for what they do own is like a year, then they'd have to roll that over. If they're not rolling it over, that means. But right now, Jonathan, I mean, let's be honest, the Fed's monetizing almost 100% of the debt. I don't even know it matters, because even if they don't roll it over, you don't got a buyer anyway, other than the Fed. I guess there's an argument if they did roll it over, then there would be an additional buyer. But I think the deficits in the United States are going to be so high that as far as a percentage of the treasuries that are being created, regardless of whether China's in the game or not, I think the Fed is still going to be the largest buyer. And so I don't even know if, I mean, I hate to say this, but I don't even know if that moves the needle based on our current economic environment, as crazy as that sounds. Oh, oh man, sorry guys, these questions are bouncing all around here. What do you think of solar panels? Well, or what I think of solar panel companies as far as an investment, I don't really like them. And the reason I don't is because, just put it simply, I like buying a dollar for 50 cents, and I don't like buying a dollar for $3, hoping it goes to $5. Most of these solar companies, they don't really have profit. So you're gambling on whether or not they're going to make profit in the future. And I don't really like doing that. I like investing in companies that are actually making profit now and getting them at a discount because the market is just too emotional. March would be a great example of that. That's an example of the market getting very emotional, and there being some cheap stuff out there. So, I bought a lot of commodity producers back then, gold miners back then, because they were making money, right? They were making a lot of cash. So I was buying their cash for 50 cents on the dollar. I wasn't buying their cash for more than its fair market value, hoping that next year they make double or triple the cash. Or in this case, next year hoping they make cash at all. I don't like doing that. And I think it goes back to my years as an entrepreneur, where I always just looked at small businesses. That's what I would, I bought and sold. I was in that process with a few businesses. And, when you're just kind of a small or mid-sized entrepreneur like I was, the types of businesses that you're looking at are businesses like liquor stores and gas stations and McDonald's and maybe some other franchises or some, other variety of different kind of just your normal standard business, and that's bringing in maybe $1 million, $2 million in gross per year, and maybe bringing in 200 or 300 to the bottom line. And I would never buy a McDonald's that wasn't making money. And what do you pay for that? Like, you're taking on a liability. Let me give you an example. This was maybe 2004 or something like that, but a gentleman who's still a good friend was involved with this franchise system, right? So he knew the other franchisees, and one of them was really struggling, not making any money, losing a ton of money, and they were going into bankruptcy. Sure, you could have argued that, oh, well, they had a great location, they had a great market, there's all this upside, they're addressable. What is that? I don't know that acronym that they use. I heard Chanos talking about that the other day, that now all of these, tech companies are trying to go public using that. It's like addressable market size or something like that, where, the bigger your addressable market size, the somehow that makes you more valuable as a company. Well, you could have argued they're in the Bay Area, so their addressable market is giant. So you go, oh, they got all this value. Well, right, but their management's terrible and they're losing money. So this gentleman that I knew at the time, or I still know, I'm sorry, he came in and said, listen, you got all this debt, you're losing money hand over fist, you got all these problems. I'll take your business, but I'll pay zero for it. I'll take it for free. I'll just take over your liabilities. And like, oh yeah, no problem. Woo-hoo-hoo. They couldn't do that deal fast enough because they weren't making any money. They were burning money every single month. And they saw the end of the runway there, and it was real darn close. So then my buddy hired me basically to go and turn around the business. And I went in there and had to fire everyone and start from scratch. And within 2 or 3 months, we were profitable. And then about a year and a half later, I sold the business for him for a substantial amount. And I ended up staying on as a consultant. And I sold the business again, the same business, after I continued to grow it. I sold it again for a different guy about a year or two after, or a year and a half after that, or whatever, for multi-millions of dollars. But my point is, he wasn't going to pay anything for the business. The business is losing money. So you got to pay me to take it. So I don't know. That's just the way I was kind of raised as an entrepreneur. That was my journey, so to speak. So that's kind of how I see publicly traded companies. I just see them like that McDonald's, or I see them like that little franchise. So when you ask me about a solar company, I'm like, I'm not paying. I mean, the solar company should pay me to own it. They're losing money. Just like that story. Why am I paying the solar company for what? Anyway, and I'm not saying I'm right. And obviously you can make a lot of money with growth stocks, but I think McIntosh hits the nail on the head when he says, you're really not investing. You're more, or well, you might be investing, but you're more of an angel investor. You got to remember that you're kind of a venture capitalist at that point. You're not really a long-term investor that's going to just sit on something and watch it grow. You're not a Warren Buffett by any stretch of the imagination. You're more of an angel investor. The problem with that is angel investors, what they do is they invest in like 100 different companies because they know they're only going to have one or two that make it. And they just make sure that those one or two have such extreme gains that it makes up for all their losers. What most amateurs do and retail folks is they play the angel investment game, but they only invest in like 2 or 3 companies. So if you only invest in 2 or 3 companies, then the chances are that all 3 of them are going to go belly up, and you're going to lose all your money. So you see, you need to really, and that's why I always suggest reading a blackjack book, because it'll help you understand those types of how there's the law of large numbers, and people don't understand the law of large numbers. They don't understand probabilities, and they definitely don't understand the impact of the I don't want to say a binomial calculus, that gets super nerdy. But if you guys just spent the best way to use an hour of your time is just to go and just go online to Google and look at an online binomial calculator, is what they call it, and just play with the numbers. Just play around with it as though it's your portfolio. Like you had 10 investments and there was a 60% probability of the investment panning out. And then look at the chances of it you getting that coin toss 7 times or 5 times out of 10 instead of 6 times out of 10. You see, and then you start to really understand why it's so much about portfolio construction. I just think that most people spend 99% of their time trying to pick out what they want to invest in or what they want to buy, and they spend almost 0% of their time in portfolio construction. And it almost needs to be the opposite, right? Because that's a great example that most people are angel investing, but they're only doing it with 2 or 3 investments, or maybe 5, when in order to have an edge, in order to have the mathematical probabilities on your side long term, with that type of risk or that type of probability that the investment actually pans out, you'd have to be invested in, I don't know what the number would be, but let's just say 50 or 60 companies in order to actually have a mathematical edge. See, what you're doing when you play the angel investment game or the VC game and you only have 3 investments is you're playing a slot machine. Those are your odds. Slot machine, meaning the house has a massive edge. And the longer you play that game, the greater your chances are of going bust, because the house has the edge. You see, you want to set up your portfolio so you're the house, and you have the law of large numbers on your side. So the longer you play the game, the greater your chances are of winning. But see, most people, they play it the other way. Oh, shoot, I'm already over. Okay, guys, let me do some shout outs here for some New Year's shout outs for everyone that was on the live stream. We have almost 1,300 people. So, and I'm definitely going to do the live stream on Sunday as well. I just wanted to throw this in tonight just to really thank everyone. And, one thing I wanted to point out, and just, I know I'm being redundant here with the thank yous, but I want to really sincerely tell how much I appreciate them taking the time out of their schedule to watch any of my videos or subscribe to the channel. I was just going over the analytics for 2020, and I'm just looking down at my Twitter feed because I tweeted it out. Let's see here. So for 2020, my YouTube channel had 17 million views, and it gained 205,000 subscribers just in 2020. I mean, I don't have any words for that other than just massive amounts of gratitude and appreciation, because I realize our most valuable asset we have is time. And the fact that you all would actually take time out of your schedule, time out of your day, time out of your life, and allocate that precious resource to watching one of my videos or hanging out with me on a live stream is hard for me still to get my head around. So thank you very much. I just sincerely appreciate all of you, and being a part of this community that we've all built has been one of the greatest experiences of my life. And I cannot wait to continue this journey with all of you into 2021. So on that note, let's do some shout outs here. We got Dickie Dunn, Jip Ziegers, Mexi Mike, Ultimate Bargains, Praddick. And Praddick, I saw you did a couple of those the little super chat deals. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Robbie Demi, David from New Zealand, Dustin McKinnon, Deal Donkey on Twitter, Vincent Bagford, a history person, Gabriel Torres, Munab Abdul Aziz, I missed Mr. Negative. Oh, that's funny. Martin Berkelad found it. Derek Johnson, Jonathan Quick, All Nighter, and it jumped around on me all night. I forgot he's got a funny name there. Jim Wolf, Auto Jam, David R, Anthony Court. And if that's the Anthony Court that I know of from back in the day, Anthony, great to hear from you, man. Hit me up on Twitter or something like that, man. I'd love to know how you're doing. I think you were friends on Facebook, but I'm just never on Facebook at all. So hope you're doing well, buddy. Brad Albone, Donna Blavelt, Greg Gurr, I already said history person, Giason 1, Bill Brown. All right, guys, have a fantastic evening. Happy New Year. I'll see you guys Sunday on the live stream.